the short-changed Parsha. There is not enough time to learn it. Never a full week. This year we had 2 days to learn Parsha Tejas. Other years we have no time at all. So
this was a good year.
This was a good year. This was a good, and right, an easier year. Every year is good. When Simchas Torah is Friday, so then you start Parsha Bereshis on Shabbos. On the Simchas Torah afternoon, finish the whole Parsha in one day. Okay, but we'll go straight where we're up to Parshas Noach. Parshas Noach is, in fact, a recreation of the whole world. There are two major things, major episodes, major occurrences that occurred in Parshas Noach that changed the whole world and set the path for the world for all times. The first one is the Mabul. You learned it already. The flood, where in fact the whole world was wiped out, destroyed. And a new world started up again. Started from scratch, basically. Because that's a recreation of the whole world. There's one difference in the second creation relative to the first creation. In the first creation, man came at the end of creation. When he came into the world, everything was ready for him. Everything was finished. He came in a finished product. He didn't have to do anything to build the world. It was handed to him on a silver platter. You know the expression on the silver platter? He took everything for granted. He didn't feel a sense of responsibility for the world because he was there just he didn't even care how it comes to his world. He was there for him to partake and for him to enjoy. He didn't realize at all that he is either contributing to the world or destroying the world. He wasn't involved in it at all. As a result, what happened? He became so confused and so perverted in his way of life that the only remedy, the only way to untangle that confusion was to wipe it off and start all over, start anew. There's a sikha where the Rebbe explains the flood. The Rebbe asks a simple question. Let's say men, it says, Rashi says that what sealed their fate, and what concluded finally that Hashem decided that He's going to destroy them, was the chomos, the robbery, the dishonesty that was amongst them. Men against men. So the Rebbe asks, okay, that's a grave sin. But does one deserve to be killed for that? Destroyed? In the Torah metes out punishments that are in proximity to the sin. There are all kinds of different. There is no such thing as being killed for robbing. All of a sudden, in here, they tell you the Rebbe destroyed the whole world because they were robbers. There were other things too. But Rashi says that what sealed it, what was the straw that broke the camel's back, was the chomos. How is that explained?
What's chomos?
Robbery. So the Rebbe explains, very interesting Indian, that the Mabul came not as a punishment for their bad deeds. It's just that the mode of life that people have reached at that point was such that there was no world to save. Normally, when you have a normal society, normal things going on, and there is also crime, so you can take the crime and punish it, clean it up, and start over again. But when the whole thing is sick, the entire world was just upside down. Everything went berserk, confused. People were going against their nature. People, animals, everything was just lost its path completely. So it wasn't a question of punishment for sin. It's just there was nothing there to save. The world was not a world. It was not an identifiable place. You didn't know who was what was what. You had to start all over. So, the Rebbe decided we have to recreate a new world. Now this new creation is different than the first one. As I said, the first one, man came after the fact. He came to a finished product. This one, the man were instrumental in saving the world. Noach and his sons were involved in saving the world. So man became now a part, a major part in the existence of the world. It's his world that he created. He no longer can take the world for granted. It's his thing. I explained to you previously that when Hashem created the world, He created everything, and then created man, and then He said to Adam Rishon, everything that I created was for you. And I created for you to guard it, to safeguard it, to develop it, and to conquer the world, and humanize the world. So that already began at the beginning of the world, the creation. But that wasn't enough, because man was still they were taking care of someone else's world, of the Hashem's world. Now, after the flood, they were instrumental in saving the world. Now they were taking care of their own world. And we see that after the flood, because of all that occurred, and because of the special part that Noach, that man, played in saving the world, the whole thing turned around. And now Hashem said to Noach that originally I had given you the vegetation for food, everything that grows. And now I'm giving you everything, the livestock as well. We can take an animal and shecht it or kill it and eat it. It's yours. The whole world is yours. You are like complete owner of it.
Noach even laws of kosher?
No. Kosher? No. Kosher, what do you say? I'm sorry, what did you say?
Kosher animal.
Yeah.
Before no time, before flood, they didn't eat meat. People didn't
No.
eat. Okay. How he learned that, but how he knew about kosher?
How what? How he knew?
Yes, about kosher. Because he didn't eat meat, and it wasn't carbonate for. I didn't hear. Maybe you said, but
No, I didn't say.
okay, sorry.
Didn't say. This is something else. Can we shut this off? Are we really cold here? Do we need this?
It's okay. It's in a minute. It's
What?
off. It's off in a minute.
Something. Noah didn't know, didn't eat meat before the Mabel, and after the Mabel he was not required to eat kosher. But he knew which are the kosher animals. Rashi says, because Lomad Noach Torah. Rashi says that Hashem said to Noach that you should take from the kosher animals, you should take 7 pairs. From non-kosher animals, you should take 2, 1 pair. And Rashi says, from this we see that Noach, Lomad Noach Torah, like Noach Torah. Which means kosher means, Toher means that which will be Toher for even later on when Torah will be given in the future. So the whole very, very fundamental change in the world took place. Now Noach and people were truly owning everything. They were allowed to kill an animal for food, whereas before that was forbidden. When Noach was in the ark, in the Teva, the whole world, a specimen of everything in the world, was included in this ark, in this box. The whole world in a little box, which was really a fantastic phenomenon. You have such varied creatures. You have the lion, you have the tiger, and you have the birds, and you have the sheep. They all existed in that little box. And there was complete peace amongst them. So the Rebbe brings down in the Sikha that during this year that they were in the box, the world was then in a state similar to what's going to be in the future after Mashiach comes. And he says that it's going to be where a wolf will graze together with a sheep. There's not going to be any harm done. That is the state of what the world was like during this year. The Rebbe points out an interesting perception, an interesting point, that on the one hand, the world was being wiped out, was destroyed, which means the world has reached the lowest level. Like I said before, it couldn't even be remedied. There was nothing to save. On the other hand, at the same time, in the box, it was the highest level that the world could be, like the future time, like when Mashiach will come and after. Because in fact, like we said before, this destruction, this Mabul, was not a punishment. It was to clean out, purify the world, to bring it to a state where it can function properly. It was a purification process. It was like a mikveh. So E Noach was in this state of complete satisfaction, a godly state. After the Mabul, Noach did not want to leave the table, did not want to leave the earth. Years ago, there was the Voice of America. During the communism in the 60s, there was a Voice of America program on the radio. They used to beam programs into Russia, so that the Russian people should get some honest news. So as soon as the program would come on, there was a beam coming from there that would just produce noise, so you can hardly hear the words, because the words were noised out by the counter beam. So he says, Noach didn't want to leave the table. He says, I'm good here. Why do I need to leave the table? And Hashem had to give him a special command, get out of the table. Not only that, Hashem had to give him another command, get all the animals out. The animals also didn't want to leave. Get them all out into the world. So, I'd like to address that. If the world has reached such a high place, such a pure state, why should I get out? Why did Hashem send him out into the world? Clearly it was not to bring him lower. It was there was a godly purpose in this. So we'll come back to this, because the similar question is in the other big episode in this parsha. The other big episode, which is later on in the parsha, I don't know if you're familiar with it. This is what's known as the Dor Hafloga, the generation of split up. When the Torah tells us that when people first started developing after the Mabul, they looked for a place where they can settle comfortably. And they found this valley, which was actually Bovel, Iraq. And they decided this is a good place to settle. And they decided they're going to settle in this place all as a single community. Not going to have split communities. One community. They were all going to be centered together, no matter how big they become. And in order to assure of this centricity of their community, that they're going to be all One, they were building a tower. This tower was due to be extremely tall, so tall that from wherever you are, how far ever you are, you could see the tower. And this tower represented the symbol of their unity. And, so to speak, theoretically, it sounds quite positive. People didn't want to create individual separate communities where they become rivals and they get into arguments. It's one community, one language, and one idea. So it sounds good, right? They wanted to have perfect peace. And Hashem saw through this, and he said, this is not good at all. And just as Noach, who refused to leave the Teva, Hashem commanded him, get out. The same here, when the people refused to spread out, Hashem forced them to spread out and to break up. And the instrument that Hashem used to spread them out is that He changed their language. They simply didn't understand each other. So they has to break up into common language. Huh?
They killed each other because they killed each other because they were angry on each other.
No, because it's not. They started. There was this discord because they didn't understand each other. Why did you do this? I asked you for this, and it fell apart. So in both of these instances, particularly in the latter one, what is the principle behind it? What's wrong if they form this one community, one entity, and they're all friends, they all one? As a matter of fact, Rashi brings down, when you'll learn later, that the contrast between the punishment that came to the people before the Mabul, when they were wiped off, in comparison to what happened over here by the Deir HaFloga, is very severe, very big difference. There they were wiped out, here they were not wiped out, they were just forced to spread out. In other words, there was something positive about them. That's why they were not destroyed. And what was the positive thing, Rashi says? The fact that there was peace and goodwill amongst themselves. So if there's peace and goodwill about themselves, so why break it up? Keep it that way. And here I want to talk about a little bit of an insight, a deeper principle. In our physical world, everything that exists can be viewed in two ways. Can be viewed from the physical perspective and from the spiritual perspective. For instance, the human being. Human being, everybody knows, is really a great presence, a miracle. It's got a brain, it's got seichel, it's really a miracle presence. Nothing comparable. And clearly, the human being, his actions and all of his abilities and his thought and his seichel and his emotions and actions all clearly demonstrate that there is a neshama, that there is a soul that flows through the person, that gives him this inspiration and gives him this spark, this fire, this life to understand and to want to pursue and so forth. At the same time, however, if we examine the human being, we see that everything that he is able to do is also contained in the physical body. Like, for instance, he's able to speak. So we say, oh, what a miracle, he's able to speak. And then when we examine how speech is produced, we see that there is air being forced through certain controlled entities that produce different sounds. And today we see the scene clearly because we can synthesize voice today. You know what synthesized voice means? We can create artificial voice. We can duplicate sound, the sound that the human being produces, we can duplicate it synthetically, artificially. And therefore, one can argue that speech is not as a neshama quality. Speech is a physical quality. It's a body function. It's not a neshama function. You don't have to be alive to speak. The machine can also speak. And once you go in that direction, then you can go and say that the heart that gives life to a person, it's a pump. And we can do open heart surgery where we have a machine take over the function of the heart for a while. That pumps blood through the person's veins. So that if we look at the person, I don't want to go higher to the brain. Even there is a whole, there's a whole theory. They say there is electrical pulses and electrical currents that run through and so forth. In any case, this means that you can explain all the activities and all the functions of the human being without ever mentioning that there is a neshama, a spiritual force. All from a physical structural perspective. So that from that, with this approach, that would mean that the human being is as a physical entity put together in a very perfect and wonderful manner. But now, it functions independently of anything else. It functions because it was put together properly, with the proper electrical pulses and nerves and muscles, and it's completely on its own. We know that this is totally false. This is total falsehood. Human being does not function on a physical level. Human being, the reason that the body functions is because there is a neshama, there's a life quality in the person. And it is the life that flows through the body and makes the body do the various actions, the various functions. So that when the hand moves, It's not a hand moving. The hand is moving in response to the neshama moving it. And the same thing is true throughout an entire human being. So that every action of the human being is directly responsive, directly connected to the neshama. There's no independence there at all. Everything comes from one source, and everything represents Chayas HaNefesh. This is the truth. But it's possible to disregard this truth, because Ruchnis you don't see. And it's possible to see it completely from a physical perspective. This view, this same perspective is true in the world at large, in the entire world. In the entire world, everything in the world functions in correlation. One thing relates to the other. One thing holds up the other. And the people of that tribe, the people of this Der HaMaflogya, after the Mabul, they said, look, there was a flood. The flood came and destroyed the whole world. That was because the world was dependent on Hashem. Let us create a world that is independent of Hashem. That stands on its own. What? Yeah. Independent. We will be all one entity. We will give support to one another. And this way, we will have everything that's needed for our subsistence, for our existence. So that this idea of this unity, the underlying idea, the underlying factor in that was not unity. It was the dissociation and breaking away from Hashem. So that one's actions are not related to Hashem. Am I acting because Hashem wants me to act? I'm acting because Hashem gives me the ability to act? Nothing at all. It's all contained within this bubble of my world. In our time, the communists created this bubble over again. They created all over again the same bubble, but they created they destroyed each other besides that. But the idea of communism is that we don't have to relate to Hashem at all. We live in a closed society, and everyone obligates himself to support the society. And that itself will keep the world going. Will keep everybody happy. You don't need anything else. You don't have to think beyond the physical world. So we have seen in our own day the failure, how false that idea was. And this is what Hashem identified in the plan of the Der HaFlogah. When he said, they want this, and it sounds good, and who knows, they may succeed in dissociating from Hashem. Or then it's going to be a dead world. It's not going to be a world with life, with godliness, with purpose. just self-sustaining. And Hashem said in the Torah that it's possible for them to succeed. If they really keep this friendship up, it's possible for them to succeed. But what is success going to bring? Success is going to bring just subsistence. Existence without life, existence without God, without meaning, without purpose. The world was created not just to exist. The world was created to reveal godliness in the world and to show how the physical world and how this whole structure, like we said before, of the human being, the human structure and the world structure, actually is sustained by a ruchnius, by a godly presence, just like the human being sustained by the neshama. That is the purpose of the world. So Hashem came down, as the Pasuk says, he came down, so to speak. He mixed up their languages, forced them to break out into little communities. And now that they are little communities separate, now clearly they have to depend and recognize that what keeps the peace in the world, what keeps the health and the well-being in the world, it is recognition of a godly presence. Because if you don't recognize that, then people are going to be on top of each other, fighting each other. Because they all have their separate interests. The only reason one nation would not swallow up another nation was to recognize, hey, everyone has their place. Hashem gave him this place, and Hashem gave this place. And everyone recognizes in his daily path of life that primarily he depends on Hashem's presence to live and to succeed and to act. And it's not a self-contained, so to speak, contained in a world bubble. The same thing was early on by Noach when he refused to go out, when he didn't want to go out to the table. Which was also a world contained within a box, a limited place. There was no discord. Everybody was at peace with each other. And we existing. But that existence, even though it's perfect peace and it's perfect bliss, does not really represent the principle, how everything serves Hashem. They are at peace with each other. Hashem told him, go out, start developing the world, and multiply. Only then, through being out and multiplying and covering the whole earth and conquering the whole earth, only then will godliness be part of your life, godliness be part of your activities. This is in brief this point. And as usual, I want to bring it down to us, understand this principle, how that affects us, and how this is true on a daily basis. We all struggling with the same question. We're all struggling with the same question, a little bit more, a little bit less. Starting with the beginning of the day. I'm in bed, and it's a comfortable, warm bed, and I have a very sweet sleep. Why should I get up? Why should I get up? Why should I disturb this comfort, this sweetness, this goodness? Huh? Inside the tape?
Noah was split the blood for nourishment different animals. It was not very good, that's inside of David.
No, that was one occurrence. It was one occurrence that he failed to feed the lion on time, Rashi brings down. Yes, he worked hard, but it was still in a very peaceful environment. So why should I disturb my peace? What?
How survived Paul?
Oak?
Paul. On the ark.
Oak. Okay. I like it. Huh?
Why take a minute till it starts?
Okay. So I want you to understand, this is something which is going on by us all the time. A little bit more clear, a little bit less clear. Every time that we have to change our situation, go out, whether, as I said, in a simple thing, climbing out of bed, or go out and learn something new, or meet another person, or make another friend. Everything. In all of these change situations. Okay. Thank you.
It's cold, don't complain.
Huh?
When it gets cold, you shouldn't complain.
Okay, that's a deal. So, very often, we think, even there, we think from a worldly perspective. Says, I better get up because Ablitsky is going to scream at me. or something like that. But you understand, this is childish. This is not the real thing. The real thing is that a person has to relate his actions all the time to the reality, to Hashem himself. I woke up, as we say, Moidani, Hashem returned the neshama to me. And now, my actions are related not to my comfort, not to the walls of my room, but to Hashem's presence. And therefore, I have to go out and go to the next step and develop my actions. Go out from my little ark. Whether it's the bed or my little group of friends. Sometimes people become, a little huddle, a little group of friends, and they can't venture out with others. Venturing out with others is the same thing. You have to make new friends all the time. You have to learn new things all the time. Why should I? I'm comfortable in this. The answer is that when you're comfortable in this, what you're doing, then you are really relying on your own comfort. You're not relying on Hashem giving you the comfort. When you go out in something new, then you know what connects you to this new situation. It is Hashem's presence that connects you to the new situation. You go out into what's called the unknown. You know the unknown? Unsecure situation. On what basis? Because you know, just like the Rebbe, Hashem is here also. It's the same God in both places. And that's the basis with which you can face the whole world. You can go wherever you need to go. Whether it is in a simple sense of physically facing the world, or spiritually, learning something new, getting into the depth of something. Every time that a person has a breakthrough, breaks away from his habit, the Alter calls a habit, a hergel. Every time a person breaks through his habit and does something beyond his habit, the Alter Rebbe calls this avodas Hashem. Even if a person sits and learns the whole day, but that's his habit, that's the way he's used. It's no longer avodas Hashem. Why? He's doing good things. Because now it became a habit, it became part of his world, part of his comfort. Like in the time of when they built this big tower, at the time when they started building the tower, there was a certain number of people. But eventually they knew it's going to grow. It's going to become big and big and big and big. No matter how big it is, it's all part of the same group. And therefore it does not venture out and does not have the godless presence there. So a person sits and learns, but as long as it is within the same habit, he does not sense in his life Hashem's presence. What when you're Hashem? I'm doing it because I'm doing it. Why do I need to think about Hashem? Nothing forcing me to recognize Hashem in my life. When he has to step out of his habit, that's when he has to rely on Hashem. That's when he needs the strength to push him. Say, okay, I have to go because this is where I will relate to Hashem more deeply, more clearly. And therefore he has to break out of his habit. This is an important principle. The Alter Rebbe discusses it in Tanya in great length. He says that even a Beinoni, what a Beinoni is, a Beinoni, the Alter Rebbe describes a Beinoni, an intermediate, a middle of the way person, not a Rosha, Chas v'Shalom, not a Tzaddik, a middle of the way person. This middle of the way person is a very great and perfect person. He never does a sin. Never does a sin. Never fails. He's always perfect in his actions. And yet, he can be a perfect person and not serve Hashem. Not be annoyed with Hashem. Not be annoyed with Hashem is a very serious thing. It means that there is no cognizance, no awareness in his life, in his activities of Hashem's presence. There's no godly life flowing through him, even though he's doing everything perfect. It's almost like saying that my body can function without the influx of life force from the neshama. What kind of person is it? It's not a person. It's a robot. A person, a yid, in his life is in constant challenge. Sasant Aveda. Always has to break through a little bit. Every day, every week, there has to be some kind of a breakthrough. Doesn't necessarily have to be very big, but in his mind, he recognizes this is a breakthrough. He didn't give in to this. He didn't give in to that. This breakthrough, this brings him to life. This brings Hashem into his life. And this gives him the strength that he can never imagine what he's able to do. Every person is limited in what he's able to do. But that limit is only a limit that pertains to a person as he is at the given moment. But he's not limited at all where he can get to, where he can accomplish, provided that he understands this principle. If he includes Hashem in his life, and he knows that Hashem is by his side, that if he has to venture out, everything has to be done with measure. In other words, you take a step and it has to be a measured step. But if it is a measured step and you take that step, on the basis that you know that you rely that Hashem will give you the strength to do it, then there is no limit to where you can go. Literally. This is the lesson. And this is how the new world was created. A new world was created after the model. A world that Hashem gave away to human beings. He gave it to you. It's your world. But remember, if the world can only last and can only live if you keep your association with the highest of the world, with the neshama of the world. If you are going to structure the world within your own context, within your own social setup, and dissociate Chas v'Sholom from the Meibushin, you dissociate yourself from Hashem, from the life, from the neshama of the world. Then it cannot exist. Hashem made sure that this is going to be the path of the world for all time. So he forced Noach out of the ark and the animals out of the ark. They should go into the open world and rely on Hashem for their sustenance, for their success. And he forced the people of the world to break up into little societies, little groups. Not to form a single group that will be supporting each other and hiding away from Hashem. Sounds very cozy, but it's the same as going to sleep in your warm bed. And it cannot last, it cannot succeed. And the most important thing is that then it has no life. And it loses its purpose for what Hashem created. Every time that you wake up in the morning and you have to break away from your sleep and get up with Jesus, it is on the basis that you recognize, not because you're afraid of Rabbi Lipsky, you recognize it's a new day and it's a new life that Hashem has given us. And then throughout the whole day, there's always little moments where I don't feel like doing this, I don't feel like doing that, and we pick ourselves up and we do what we have to do. That brings Hashem into our life. And that develops us into people, into Yidden, who are able to do without limit, to accomplish everything that it will ever be facing in our lives. Everything. The principle of facing life, nobody knows the future. Nobody knows what's going to be in the future. How does one go out in the world and start a life? The principle of facing life is that I'm ready, mitzad the koyach ha'avodas Hashem, to do whatever will be necessary. And I know that Hashem will not present to me something that is impossible for me to do. And that which is possible for me to do, Hashem will definitely help me to succeed. That's the basis of approaching life. Without that, you can't approach life. You have to understand, we live in a time when everything becomes so clear. There are people today who, because of some psychological mistake, whatever it is, because of various thoughts that enter their mind, they're afraid of crossing the streets. There are people who can't do simple actions, simple functions. Not because they're physically not well, but because every action requires some degree of trust beyond yourself. Some degree of recognition that there is a life, that there is a life-giving, that there is God that gives sustenance to the world. And if you don't have that little degree, you can't function. A person who relies entirely on himself cannot function. There was a man, I mentioned it here not long ago, you may remember, by the name of Howard Hughes. Remember? The Howard Hughes, in his time, was the wealthiest man in the world. In those days, they said that he had $7 billion. But this is not today. This is going back 30 years ago. It's astronomical wealth. With the wealthiest man in the world. This Howard Hughes was so afraid of his own shadow. He was always contained within his own environment. He did not sleep 2 nights in a row in the same place. So he shuttled from one place to the other with helicopter. He didn't have a life. He did not have a life. Why? Because he related and relied on his wealth and not on God. He didn't need God. I have my wealth. Then he came to a point where he had no life. There was nothing outside of his bubble. He lived within a worldly context, a worldly structure, and he lost all life. I'm mentioning it because the time when he died, the Rebbe mentioned it by the Fabrengen. Just one time, just as a lesson to understand what's going on. He was a man who was fabulously wealthy, and he did not experience life. He was totally unhappy. I want to tell you one other little story. Which I may have mentioned also long time ago. I recall during the 50s, 1950s, which was very close after the war, there was a news item. There were two men, perfectly healthy men, who came out from the basement of their mother's house for the first time in 30 years. What happened was, in the time of the First World War, they were young men, and their mommy was afraid that they'd be drafted into the army. So she wanted to secure their lives, that they shouldn't be drafted. So she hid them in the basement of her house. And made it very comfortable. Made them, a comfortable basement. And in this basement, they lived. She fed them over there. She brought them their clothes. They didn't step out. She kept them safe in the basement. This continued on through the war, and then after the war. And then it continued on for 30 years or 40 years till after the Second World War. Now, these two men were safe and secure, completely oblivious to what's going on in the world. And they ventured out from this basement someplace at the end of the 40s and the 50s. Total idiots. They didn't know what's going on. They didn't participate in life in the world. But they were secure. They were secure, physically secure. They were physically healthy. You understand? So this was a tragedy. We can secure the body and kill the soul. The soul needs to go out, needs to live, needs to experience, needs to trust in God. That's the only way to live. And then you take your chances. You do things. If we don't take a chance, and if we hide ourselves, so to speak, within our little box, we are doing ourselves a terrible disfavor, disservice. And this is what's called, in our terminology, in Torah it's called Avodas Hashem. Avodah means to work hard. On what basis am I working? Am I forcing myself? The basis that Hashem is here and I need to do what Hashem wants me to do. That carries me out and that gives me the strength to face everything that I need to face. And ultimately be successful. So Hashem should help us all. This is the beginning of the year, that we should not crawl into boxes, not want to be crawling into boxes, but to be able to face our world and have the strength to break out, not to allow ourselves to be taken in by the Yetzer Hara, by the laziness or anything like that, but do what we need to do, even if it means that I'm not comfortable, even if it means that I have to force myself. Because this is where the real human strength comes in. This is the only way that we can eventually face our life and our world. That's the basis for going on to the world. There's no other basis. So we should have a successful year.